The Dick Morris Show. Entertaining and informative. On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Hi, welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug DePiro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. You know, can Iran accomplish regime change in Washington? I told Newsmax on Friday that President Trump risks being drawn into a prolonged conflict with Iran by overestimating how much the U.S. military force can change the regime's nihilistic behavior. I said that after U.S. forces had struck the military targets on Iran's Krog Island, warning that further threats to the Strait of ships to international shipping to the Strait of Hormuz would lead to the island's infrastructure being destroyed. Krog Island is Iran's primary export terminal. Trump said Friday that U.S. forces had obliterated military targets on Krog Island and warned that the oil infrastructure could be next. Not for reasons of decency. For reasons of decency, they've chosen not to wipe out the oil infrastructure on the island. However, should Iran or anyone else do anything to interfere with the free and safe passage of ships through the Straits of Hormuz, I will immediately reconsider that decision. During the interview, I said that I was worried that Trump could repeat mistakes made by other presidents who believed that overwhelming American military power would be enough to defeat adversaries willing to absorb heavy costs without changing their behavior. I said, I'm concerned that Trump is falling into a trap that Lyndon Johnson and George Bush 41 and Bush 43 have all fallen into before. Presidents can lose public support and re-election prospects when they become stuck in conflicts that do not confirm conventional assumptions about deterrence. Iran's leaders may not view the war costs the way the U.S. officials do. I'm worried that Trump's commitment to the overwhelming military force that we have is blinding him to acknowledge the overwhelming refusal of the Iranians to really care. Iranians are not bent on advancing their own goals, and are only bent on advancing their own goals, and will not be deterred. Washington is in effect applying its own standards to the conflict against an adversary that might accept losses the U.S. would find politically or strategically intolerable. I think that really what's happening here is that we're saying that we're applying our own values and standards to this war, and saying these prices would be unacceptable to the American people and unacceptable to us. But they're acceptable to the Ayatollahs and they're acceptable to the Iranian leadership.
Right.
A miscalculation in expectations could leave Trump trapped into widening conflict, drawing a historical parallel to Iraq. And I'm worried that we're getting stuck in Iran in much the same way that Bush 43 got us stuck in Iraq.
So, Dick, did you send that to the president?
Yeah, I sent it to him in several different ways and did it on television and on radio. And my point is that when you look at the world from inside the White House, the American power appears totally overwhelming. But when you look at it from Tehran and from their point of view, the terrorist cells, they think that as long as they're willing to fight to the death, they cannot be defeated.
They have nothing to lose, basically.
Yeah. And I'm worried that that miscalculation is the same miscalculation that went on. Johnson made that miscalculation in Vietnam. Bush 41 made that miscalculation. Bush 43 made it. And Biden made the same miscalculation. And we have to realize that these crazies are prepared to pay any price and accept any pain in order to win. And we think that by raising the force level and raising the threat level to a level that's unacceptable to most people, it will be unacceptable to the people who are backing the Iranian regime. And I'm not sure that that's the case.
Well, I believe now, once Trump hears this and listens to you, he's probably thinking that anyway. He's pretty sharp. But now that he heard your words, he's definitely going to at least think about it. And he's smart enough to say, it's actual, that's probable, and maybe he should think about how he goes forward. I really believe he does, and he will.
We always fail to realize that a massive military arsenal is no match for our enemy's fanaticism. It's easy to see how military superiority could lead Trump to overconfidence and his administration to hubris. The solution is for Trump to abandon regime change as his goal. Abandon regime change in Iran as his goal. Instead, focus on denying Iran the ability to spread terror around the world. Don't predicate our victory or defeat on our ability to make terror unreasonable. We must not let our easy win in Venezuela lead us to believe that we persuade the zealots in Iran to act rationally. But we can make it impossible for the Iranian regime to spread terror throughout the world and deny it access to nuclear weapons. That more modest aim, still worthwhile and deserving, must become our objective, even if Iran is allowed to perpetuate horrible harm on its own people and refuse regime change. By scaling back our war aims, we can still succeed at the key task, curbing Iran's ability to inflict massive global harm, and emerge victorious in this war with our president, his ratings, and our party intact. We cannot stop Iran from hurting the world economy, but we can stop it from humiliating us and wrecking the global economy, and that will be good enough.
So basically, if we see them going towards us with their terror, we take care of them. But as far as their regime, stay back and hope for the best and try to work it in, and whether we talk to them or not.
Destroy their capacity.
Right. To do their terror.
Yeah, that's it. It's not just a question of scaring them. It's a question of actually physically destroying their capacity.
What's they doing now?
Kill the missile launchers, kill the missile manufacturing facilities.
Their army.
Get rid of their army, get rid of their navy, get rid of their officer corps, and then let them be a helpless, sputtering giant.
Yeah.
But don't let the destruction of that regime or changing its mind be our goal in this war. Because so many presidents have lost because they didn't realize that the Viet Cong in Vietnam and the Ayatollah in Iran and the Hamas,
they dig
would
in.
Never be reasonable.
And they dig in.
Exactly. And that's the thing I'm most afraid of here.
Well, I'm glad you sent this to him and you're talking to him.
Yeah, and this program is part of that. I want him to hear it, and I want him to hear it from me. While this is going on, there's a major earthquake taking place in Washington on the question of whether the Supreme Court will end race-based congressional districts. Liberals are getting nervous about November's midterm elections after the Supreme Court handed Republicans a huge victory, which could signal how the judges might rule on a pending Voting Rights Act issue. And this is absolutely crucial. On Monday night of this past week, the High Court ruled on a gerrymandering case and paused a lower court order that would have required New York to redraw its congressional maps in an effort to aid black and Latino voters. That is, redistrict so that more blacks and more Latinos get elected. Judge Samuel Alito, opposing that decision, called the original ruling, which was reversed, unadorned racial discrimination. This is a massive victory for Republicans in more ways than one. Not only does it serve to preserve New York's 11th congressional district, the only district in the city held by Republicans, but it also hints that the Supreme Court may be inclined to strike down part of Voting Rights Act. Such a ruling would eliminate race-based districts and with it a significant portion of Democratic seats in the House. The New York Times was forced to admit that the most recent ruling was a Republican win, but the liberal panic is only beginning to set in. The real affair emerged when the authors of the opinion linked it to the case of Louisiana versus Calais. The main question in that case, which will be decided momentarily, is whether Louisiana violated the Constitution when it created a second majority-minority district. If the answer is yes, it would scramble the country's congressional maps. Mother Jones, another left-wing outlet, talked about it can have huge implications. Alito is essentially saying that districts drawn under the Voting Rights Act or other state and federal laws to remedy centuries of racial discrimination are as racist as the racism itself was meant to rectify. Liberals and their allies are scared stiff about losing nearly 24 House seats as the midterm elections are approaching. The best comment on this was made by Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts. He said, and I thought it was just terrific, he said the way to end discrimination based on race, the way to stop discrimination based on race is to stop discriminating based on race.
It's so true.
That's what Roberts said. So any kind of discrimination that tries to bend over backwards and permit that and insists on racial discrimination to aid blacks and Hispanics and to aid minorities really helps it. The way to stop discriminating based on race is to stop discriminating based on race.
Yeah.
It seems clear that the Supreme Court is leaning toward ending the practice of race-based districts because the law has done its job. This provision of the Voting Rights Act has been in place since 1965. That's over 60 years. When will it end? It seems that the end is finally coming to an end.
You know, Morgan Freeman had an interview with Don Lemon, that idiot. And Lemon said, "What do you think of racism?" And he goes, "There is no racism." And he goes, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, look at you. You're doing well. Look at me. We're both making a lot of money. We're on TV right now. You want to end racism? Stop talking about it."
Yeah.
The same thing that he just said.
It is.
You want to end it? Stop bringing it up every time.
And the point was that in upholding the Voting Rights Act for decades, the Supreme Court has always said it's temporary. While we have a heritage of racial discrimination and slavery, we need this provision to make sure that this continues. But now what they're really saying is the time has come. Time has come. It's time for us to stop discriminating based on race in order to stop discriminating based on race.
Yeah.
And those lines are by Roberts, and I think they're going to dominate what the Supreme Court does. And I think
it's common sense.
Is the true story behind the midterm elections coming up.
Did you see this thing about Mandami being so horrible? He basically put the prayer rugs, whatever you call them, in front of a 9/11 memorial. Here's what's her name. I think Gonzalez is her name. Listen to what she has to say. Let's see. I don't have my speaker on. Let's start over.
Country and just expect me to sit here and take it? Because we heard that Iran was like, all right, sleeper cells activate, and now it appears that we are under attack. Maybe letting all of these people in was not a good idea. Apparently, we don't like it being a first world country, and we're just importing people to eat on the floor. NYC firefighters angry after bosses and Muslim firefighters make startling change to 9/11 memorial area for Ramadan. Put their little prayer mats right in front of the memorial plaque. Coincidence or something more sinister? They are sending a message. Rubbing it in your face is the point because you can't say anything. I don't care if you call me an Islamophobe. I don't care if you call me racist. It's enough already. There need to be more people willing to go out and...
So, with that, we have on the rocks, Roxana Maria on the air. And what do you have to say about that, Rock?
Hi, Dick. Hi, Doug.
Hi, Doug.
Actually, everything you were talking about came to my mind with something that I watched the other evening. So my quote is, "The only clue to what man can do is what man has done." This quote was from 1946. To me, it represents all we need to foresee history is to understand its past. I watched the movie Nuremberg with Russell Crowe portraying Hermann Göring from the Nuremberg trials in 1945. Robert Jackson prosecuted. It was new territory from which laws became the bedrock of all future modern war crimes. But what I found the most interesting and the most disturbing was the findings of psychiatrist Dr. Douglas Kelly, who was brought in to study the minds of those who carried out some of the most horrific crimes in humanity. And so here we are, a nation divided. Some say we're in a war of evil versus God, where on our own streets, hatred of the United States has become a familiar chant. A recent example in New York City, the last Friday of Ramadan, they were flaunting their hate to burn everything in the U.S. down, for America to go to hell. And who are they? Organized under the banner of Islamic idealism, overlapping with their International Day of Outrage, supporting Hamas, fallen Iran, idealizing leaders of slaughter, torture, and destruction. Dr. Kelly wrote only one book on his foundings of the minds as such. It failed, and he never wrote another. However, he spent the last days of his short life being thrown off radio stations, off of platforms, with this message repeatedly. He said, I would say I'm quite certain there are people in America who would willingly climb over half the American public if they knew they could gain control of the other half. They stoke hatred, and it is textbook. And if you think the next time it happens, we'll recognize them because of scary uniforms, you are wrong. It will start as an ideology woven into a foundation which we were founded on, in God we trust. So I'll leave you with a quote by Jung. It hung over his home in Switzerland, a reminder to acknowledge the holy awe, it present and working in everyone's everyday life. Quote, whether summoned or not, God will be present. And it is up to all of us Americans to protect the sacredness and sacrifices, to not allow our nation's foundation in God we trust to be in any way changed. Challenged, yes, if you will, but never silenced. And so it is. Amen.
Amen. Listen,
yes.
Rock, stay on the line. We got to take a break. We want to talk to you when we get back, okay? Okay. We're going to when we get back.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.